All right, welcome to GothCast, episode 12. This is Dr. Sanders.
This is Robbie Gore.
All right, today we have another movie episode, and this time we're specifically doing vampire movies.
Yeah, not that we haven't already done them, but this episode is dedicated to vampire movies.
We have done Let the Right One In previously, and, you know, I love that movie.
And Only Lovers Left Alive.
Yeah, and Only Lovers Left Alive. You know, love those movies.
Yeah.
But these are probably going to be some of the most well-known vampire movies that are out there. And these movies were actually pretty successful for the most part.
I would agree with that. And more so than those last movies, I felt like those movies were movies that happened to be about vampires, while the movies themselves were not necessarily like...
About being vampires?
Yeah. While these movies very much so are about characters being vampires rather than just having characters who are vampires.
Yeah, and I think... Also with these ones specifically, that is very true. But there's also not a lot of hidden messages within these movies.
Yeah, they're much more straightforward.
There is to some extent, like maybe, because the movies that we're going to do today are The Lost Boys, Interview with the Vampire, and Queen of the Damned.
Yep.
And so most of these movies, while you could argue that maybe Lost Boys is about the corruption of teenagers and what that's doing to society and how they feel about it and how they feel... and you could argue that maybe, gosh, I don't know, Queen of the Damned is about what it means to be famous or something. These movies don't necessarily have a straight message right in your face about that.
Yeah, you really got to dig to find a deeper message in them.
Yeah. I'm sure some people will have that. You know, some people who are huge fans of some of these movies probably have that idea that this is really what this movie's about.
A movie doesn't always need to be those things.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And one of the movies we're going to talk about is a perfect example of a movie that functions perfectly well without being one of those things.
Yeah. So, but first, we're going to talk about Lost Boys.
Yep.
So this is 1987, and this is directed by Joel Schumacher.
Yep.
And for those of you who don't know, Joel Schumacher is a very infamous director.
He directed Lost Boys.
Yeah. Well, he directed Lost Boys, and that's probably one of his like most critically acclaimed movies that people like.
Teasing.
Yeah. So he directed Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, the one where I think George Clooney is Batman.
Yep.
And he also did a Nicolas Cage film, 8mm, which is a pretty good movie.
Because that's Nicolas Cage in it?
I mean, you know, there are other reasons, but so Lost Boys is probably his, you know, most revered movie to, you know, his fans. Like, it's actually pretty close to a lot of people's hearts for like vampire movies.
Definitely. And within the Gothic community itself, Lost Boys is a big staple, and lots of people love it. And watch
even my Encyclopedia of Vampires.
Yep.
Like, right on the cover is, you know, I was gonna say Christian Slater. I was thinking of the
having True Romance flashbacks.
Yeah. So right on the cover is Kiefer Sutherland.
Yep.
You know, with his blonde bleached hair, right on the cover of that, and so that's how popular this book is.
Yeah. For
like the vampire mainstream of today, and even, you know, in the 80s. Especially, of course, because there wasn't a huge amount of not like horror movies that were coming out.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I think that we are talking about these specific movies is that these are vampire movies that aren't wholly about like, let's run away from vampires. You know, it's not like a zombie flick where there's vampires terrorizing everybody, you know.
Yeah.
Like the main characters in Lost Boys, Michael, right in the beginning, I mean, well, not right in the beginning, but very soon in the movie,
it's pretty early on.
Yeah, pretty early on in the movie, he becomes a vampire.
Yep.
And just letting you know, like with all our movie episodes, of course, there will be spoilers.
Yeah, we're the one podcast that when we do movie episodes, there's just expect spoilers.
Yeah. We mention every time we do one, but I just need to reiterate, just in case it's the first time listening. But yeah, so he becomes a vampire very early on, and it's about getting to know these vampires is actually people to some extent, at least the ones that are kind of redeemed or the ones that are kind of not fully embracing the vampires.
Yeah.
And so with a lot of movies before that, you know, you have like Dracula and you know, even the Hammer horror movies, which were fantastic movies with Christopher Lee, but they didn't obviously
portray the vampire as the villain.
Yeah, whereas these, it really portrays them as, you know, kind of like punks and portrays them as kind of kids. You know, there's even a child vampire in this. Mm-hmm. And you had things like Dawn of the Dead had done zombie kids before, which is, you know, they used to kill them right in the beginning, which is a very sad moment in the movie. But this one, they don't portray being a vampire necessarily as the worst thing ever. They don't portray it as a good thing.
Yeah.
But, and then, you know, the people don't want to be vampires. But it's showing that they're
capable of something other than evil.
Yeah, they're like misfits, they're not sitting in the castle going like, oh, yes, ha ha ha,
Yeah.
There is a very villainous character in here, but it doesn't really play into it as much. And he's more just like, it just comes in at the end. But but it is an interesting way that these vampires are portrayed. And, it may not seem extremely like groundbreaking today, but, at the time I could see why a lot of people would have been into this movie.
No, I certainly do. And given that this movie isn't as serious as people often take it, it's branded as partially a comedic film.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is satire about vampire culture. And
yeah. Well, think about it. It's one of the first vampire movies that had a big budget that takes place on a beach.
Yeah.
so you just kind of think about it like that. It's already kind of, they're not going to the castle and drinking the virgin's blood and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They live in a fictionalized version of Santa Cruz, so Santa Clara.
Yep.
So
Which and it's shot in Santa Cruz, by the way.
It looks like Santa Cruz, so I'm not surprised. As far as the story goes, so this family moves to the fictional town of Santa Clara.
Yeah.
And they start, the mother's basically divorced and everything. And
she's trying to start anew.
Yeah. And so they like beach town kind of thing, they have the boardwalk and like the pier and everything.
Yep. And she's moved in with her father.
Yeah, crazy grandpa character, which is awesome. He's totally a trope, but I love the crazy grandpa character.
One of the best characters in the movie.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Actually, he's so much fun.
Most depth there.
Yeah. And he has the last line in the movie. It's one of the best lines ever in like any vampire movie. So they move there and oh man, there's these mysterious people, who are
these very punker looking.
Yeah, they ride motorcycles and they have earrings.
A bunch of guys who look like they're in Billy Idol's band are riding around on dirt bikes.
Oh my gosh, I never thought about that. That is so funny. I didn't think of it. He totally looks like Billy Idol. That is so funny. Yeah, I can't believe I didn't think about that. But and also, one of the guys I want to mention is Alex Winter, who's from Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
And that's super cool because nobody ever knows.
Yep.
I mean, he's a great director now. Actually, he did the movie Downloaded, which is an amazing film. It's on Netflix, at least at this moment. Netflix is.
Always changing.
Yeah, but Downloaded, directed by Alex Winter, is a great movie. But yeah, so there's all these there's all these punk guys, and then, the older brother, Michael, discovers that they're vampires, and he himself becomes what's called a half-blood vampire, and he's not a full vampire.
He's lured in by this mysterious virginous character.
Yeah, so this girl and of course she ends up having her own conflict and all this stuff, and they have to kind of figure out how to defeat the vampires, and the whole we gotta figure it out. And basically the little brother, this is basically one of the movies is the two Corys, so it's Corey Haim and Corey Feldman.
Yep.
Corey Haim is dead now, and then Corey Feldman is of course Corey Feldman now, and he's just kind of he's not as crazy as he was, but so Corey Haim's character is his little brother is just trying to figure out oh man, how do I stop these vampires, and doesn't really do much in the movie.
Yeah, he doesn't even believe that there are vampires for the first half of the film.
Yeah.
Until he actually discovers that his brother's a vampire.
Yeah, yeah. and then they kind of pull a Goonies in the end where it's we all need to band together with squirt guns.
It did feel very Goonies-esque, right? A bunch of kids ganging together to bring down the vampires and
yeah. So that's a basic plot. It's kind of formulaic if you think about it. It's move to a new town. Oh, there's something weird about the town, and nobody else has noticed it, and nobody else has stopped it. But the kids can do it, sort of thing, or teenagers. And that part it's not what this movie's setting out to do. It's not set to revolutionize it. But I think the style of this film and the kind of way that it's shot was the thing that a lot of people grasp onto.
It was very original. I mean, we'd never seen a vampire movie that takes place in a beach city before.
Yeah.
And
or at least nothing by, maybe Troma or something had done that for budget reasons, but...
Yeah. And this is one of the first times we're seeing vampires. They can't, directly go out in daylight, but they can kind of get around,
They wear sunglasses.
Yeah,
Yeah, it does have the vampire lore. Basically, if people aren't fully vampire yet, then they... kind of can be people too,
sort of. They just have to wear lots of black and sunglasses.
Yeah, exactly. And be mysterious. But but it does have that sort of thing. You don't really see a ton of them killing people. People disappear and all that stuff, which it does lend to that mythos of we need to kill to survive and everything. And of course, the people who we're supposed to like in the movie can't do that.
Yep.
That's and it is good. It does have a good balance of that, like sort of keeping to the lore that we know for it, and
while taking some liberties with it.
Yeah, kind of putting an 80s spin on it.
Yeah.
Like, just put your shades on and you're good, like your Ray-Bans. So that's good. But the real problem, I think, with this movie is just that the character development is not there.
Yeah, unfortunately, there aren't really a lot of characters in this movie that I like, which I hate to say. The mom is unbearable.
I think she's okay. I think the biggest problem with these characters is that you have a very stylized movie, or at least tries to be very stylized. It has the sunken hotel kind of thing that's their hideout, and they're all dressed very distinctly, and Michael's at least dressed extremely 80s, and so the brothers are just like cliches of 80s.
I know. Michael looks like he's part of Whitesnake.
yeah, exactly. But you have these sort of distinct looks. It's not like Victorian or anything like that. It is a very sort of punk rock or spin on Victorian vampires.
It's either very punk or very 80s hair metal, depending on the person or character.
Yeah, that's cool. But these characters you just don't get to know. Like, they're all just so tropey. Like, Michael doesn't really stand out to me as a good hero, and not necessarily has to be a hero or an anti-hero. He just comes off as like the big brother who's like frustrated and angry, and like he uses his anger to solve the issue in the end. Like when he's fighting the head vampire, it's just like like so.
And we don't
mad.
see him do a whole lot in the movie up until kind of the end. Really, he's just like, oh, why am I a vampire? Why does this happen to me?
Yeah, that's really true, and that's the biggest issue with this movie. And unfortunately, I think it does come off as a little bit more boring because of that.
Yeah.
And like I said, like there's some great scenes and everything, but this almost is a harder movie to watch when you have to actually sit down and focus on it. It's a great background movie, like party movie or something like that.
Definitely.
Where you're all just like hanging out, maybe drinking a beer or something. And
I'll say this about it. It can be a very fun movie, and it does a lot of things well. But I think if you're used to today's movies and like indie film and what it's become, I don't think you're prepared for what this movie's going to be.
Maybe back when it was released, the aesthetic of it would have driven it to be like, oh, this is totally unique. But we've seen a lot of different things done with vampires at this point. I mean, we've even seen vampires, I hate to drop the T word, but, even we have Twilight, which is like vampires in high school who are totally rich and sexy and stuff for like moms or something.
I mean, God's sakes, we see more character development in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, that's very true. So I think that just doesn't drive this as much anymore. So you just have a lot of very tropey characters. And by tropes, that's in just in case nobody knows, somebody doesn't know what trope is. It's
cinema term for almost kind of like stereotypes.
Or cliches. Yeah. So you have the mom who's like having trouble getting on her feet and trying to go on dates and is very flustered all the time, and the rebellious teenager, and you have the kind of goofy brother who somehow pulls it all together in the end, and the mysterious girl, like Star in this movie is totally like
and
that,
the kooky grandpa,
and the kooky grandpa. So while you do have a very basic plot and very basic characters, the thing that is most appealing about this, for me, it seems to be, is just the cinematography and the way it's shot. It is a very unique look, and a lot of people love that and grasp onto that. I used to love this movie. Like, I used to really, really enjoy this movie. And I find that as time goes by, as I've seen so much done with the vampire mythos, I just don't see this one holding up as well. And that's really unfortunate.
It is. And I have to agree with you there. For me, when I go back and watch this film, again, what stands out for me is the cinematography, and then what they decide to do with the set and set design and costume design and all of these things. Basically, all the style and fashion of the movie is really what stands out to me the most.
Yeah.
But I've seen so many vampire movies that unfortunately do a better job of creating characters that I want to see progress and grow and suffer and live with them through the film, that this movie doesn't hold up for me.
Especially vampire movies have always been sort of a tragic story, right? Somebody who had humanity at one point, who has lost it and becomes this creature, and then it's kind of sad when they die. Or sometimes they welcome death because it's like, I've been alive so long, I haven't felt anything in this long.
Yep.
And this one, you just don't have it. Like David, the main vampire played by Kiefer Sutherland, I want him to show more because he's like the main guy. And, sort of like supposed to be that like tragic character who you would think would be something who is really deep.
Yeah. And for there being a love interest in the movie, we hardly see him and her together in any scenes.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, it's barely a love triangle, honestly. She's like, Star is basically just sort of like, you know, every time she's like, hey, I want to go with Michael, and he's just like, get on the bike.
Yeah.
You know, like, come on. And you can obviously tell that she doesn't want to be with him. Like, so there's not even that kind of conflict. It's basically just like a jerk. Like, that's his whole character is the 80s jerk.
Yep.
And that's just lame. Like, that's just such a bummer, because you have this story which is begging for these sort of things, like, you know, like, what was his life like before? Why are they these kind of vampires? How old are they? You know, and you just don't have
How does Grandpa know about all the vampires and has not mentioned anything until the end of the movie?
Exactly. You know, one thing I don't like about Santa Clara is all the vampires. You know, and so that's my issue with it. The music too is okay. You know, at least it has some sort of uniqueness to it.
I was very disappointed that the movie ends with a Doors cover instead of just
the actual Doors song.
Yeah, because it sounds so close to it. It's like you really couldn't have just pulled together a little more money to license using the song.
Yeah. Well, it opens, of course, the song everyone associates with this is People Are Strange.
Well, that's what it closes with.
Yeah, I thought it was actually done by the Doors in the movie in the beginning.
In the beginning, yes.
Oh.
In the end, no.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. But then also there's the children chanting thing.
Yeah.
That's, of course, you know, the da 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 da, like, that's a totally like famous piece from that movie. I do like it. I actually like that a lot.
That was one of the better music pieces I thought from the film.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of my favorite things from the film.
Yeah.
Which is weird to say, is that a music piece from it. And then they have I just want to mention the like crazy oiled up guy playing I still believe, playing the saxophone. I always think that's so funny. I think
that was a weird scene.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, like, what kind of concert is that? Everyone's there too. Looks so hot. Like, I mean, not like hot as in like sexy. I mean, hot as in like literally they all look really hot.
Wasn't there like fire on stage?
Yeah, they had
something?
like pits or something. Like fire pits. So weird. So it's a Lost Boys for me. Is there anything you want to add about it?
Unfortunately, no. I think that pretty much sums up what I have to say about the Lost Boys.
Yeah, you know, for a movie so famous and probably a movie that so many people want to hear us talk about and love, you know, I do like this movie. I will say, you know, it's a fun kind of movie. It's not, like this is a wild ride.
Bad movie, but it's just not, I don't know. Like, as far as it being like a great piece of cinema, I don't think it qualifies as that.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because this, you know,
it's more like a fun party movie than it is like a serious.
Yeah, because if you're gonna, I don't know, I'll put it this way. If you're gonna have like a kind of crazy spooky party, you're probably gonna put on Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yep.
Because that movie's a ton of fun, and that movie's supposed to be a lot of fun. Lost Boys, it almost feels like it takes itself a little bit too seriously. But
that's what I found that bothered me the most, was that so there'd be these moments of funniness throughout the film, which I felt they could have taken much more advantage of, given the fact that this is a movie about vampires taking place in Santa Clara.
Yeah.
But they don't. In fact, like, by the second half of the film, we almost like see a complete loss of humor.
Yeah, that's true. Especially by the end, you know, the whole fight scene at the end, there's nothing funny about it. I mean, literally, a vampire is scalded to death in a bathtub of holy water and garlic.
The return of humor is literally just the grandpa's line at the end.
Yep. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And so it is a movie at odds with itself. Like I said, it's hard for me to like say this movie's totally bad, because basically what we were just talking about is just list a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah.
It is still a good movie. It's not like super great, and it's not super bad.
Yeah. It's not the worst vampire movie ever made. In fact, it does some really interesting things with the vampire genre.
Yeah. If anything, I would almost say that it is one of the essential movies for vampires in the 80s.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a decade that didn't do an insane amount that was...
We're going to see a lot more done with vampire films in further decades.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even, like, you know, before you had a lot of the classics, right? You had all the Hammer horror films.
Yeah.
And like anything with Christopher Lee. You had even the classic Dracula, you know, with Bela Lugosi and everything in previous decades. With this one, this is usually listed as like right up at the top, if not number one for 80s vampire movies. And Yeah, it's just
Except I kind of almost enjoy like the hunger more than I enjoy this.
that's a whole different subject. So we shouldn't even get into that. But yeah, I see what you're saying. That's gonna be something we're gonna talk about later. But just keep in mind, if you're going to Lost Boys, if you're a huge fan of this movie, I've seen this movie. I can't even name how many times.
Yeah,
and I've seen tons of documentaries about it, and it does have its charm. And
it has its merit too.
Yeah,
like I think that you should definitely watch this film if you've not seen it.
Yeah, but I think today there are just better movies about vampires.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing that detracts from this movie, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my opinion on Lost Boys. Give it a shot or don't.
Yeah, I would say watch it if you haven't.
Okay, so this is going to be our new segment for this episode. And like every week, we found 3 totally unrelated stories that we thought were pretty interesting. And I'll let Robert start with this one. And it's, if you got kids, you can get them this.
Yeah, so I feel like this is a funny one because officially, I'll just come out and say it. They've made a children's version of the Ouija board.
Yep.
So it's all pink and it's definitely geared towards girls, like little girls. It has the feel to it that like you play with your 5-year-old daughter, like have a Ouija session with her.
Yeah.
I just think it's a little bit funny because the Ouija board originally is a toy marketed by Hasbro for children.
Yep.
So why is there a children's version of a children's toy?
It's a good way to think about it. Yeah, it is. I think the Ouija board, obviously, in the last few years has been...
I think it's because of, like, all the backlash that's come against the Ouija board.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that you can go to Target and buy a Ouija board, right?
They sell it at Toys R Us.
Yeah, so it is a toy.
Yeah.
And, it has taken on a very dark, sinister kind of vibe in the last few years. It's become more of a thing for teenagers, like teenagers who go to like the woods and play with the Ouija board in the attic.
Black Star Canyon, we're gonna play with the Ouija board.
Exactly. So there is totally a different dynamic that's associated with it now, and I can see why they're trying to make it like this is still fun. But I think that the connotation of the Ouija board that is currently set in stone is no one is going to buy that for their kids anymore. Like,
except for maybe goth people.
Obviously goths, yeah. But I'm saying like mainstream, which is because this is like the way that this is being marketed.
It's being marketed for mainstream people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this isn't something that's like a niche product. This isn't something that's going to be like, you find it like ipso facto in Fullerton or something.
Yeah.
This is something that they're going to try and market to like, hey, like look at this is a toy that you guys can play with. There is no way that like anyone who has a religious background who has strong beliefs about this Ouija board
it's already a big long video, some religious guy basically talking about how this is Satan's work and how he's trying to trick our children into worshiping him and opening up portals for demons and things like that.
So yeah, like that stuff's gonna happen.
Yep.
And so I think they were obviously trying to
I think they were trying to in a weird way prevent that from happening, but in releasing this, I think they're kind of almost forcing it to happen.
It's not surprising really because they've been making a lot more money off the Ouija board and the whole like Ouija boards on t-shirts and Ouija boards on,
especially with shows like American Horror Story being very big right now.
Yeah.
Ouija boards are a big selling product again, which they haven't kind of been like if you go back like even just 3 years ago, it was kind of a dead toy. No one really used it anymore.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of confused by what their idea for this is. Like, because it would be different if they were only making so many of these things.
Or if they made it more niche. Like, if they made it like kind of like, yes, it is a kid's Ouija board, but let's say instead of a bright pink Ouija board with a heart little moving piece, we made it, kind of purple with a couple little cute skull things and like...
Yeah, with something
kind of Tim Burton-y looking.
Yeah, something that's kind of in between the mainstream and the sort of niche culture.
Yeah.
That would have totally made sense, but because of the fact that they seem to be going all out in terms of trying to get a new market for Ouija boards, it just, I don't think it's going to be very successful. So it may be one of those things that's just around all the time that you see just everywhere, and you're like, why is this here?
It's going to be one of those toys that's around for a couple of years, and people are just going to stare at it and be like, What?
It's gonna end up on BuzzFeed lists of what were they thinking toys.
And people are already doing reviews about it.
Oh yeah, of course. Like it's gonna be it's almost made for YouTube videos.
Yep.
This kind of thing. So, but yeah,
hey, I guess all publicity is good publicity, right?
that's true.
Yep.
It's very true, especially in today's world.
Yep.
Except for SeaWorld. So, besides that.
All right. Well, that's pretty much the children's Ouija board.
Yep.
And so
next we got this is kind of a weird one, but we thought it was something looked very familiar to us.
Yeah.
So, Star Wars, of course, is becoming it's the big thing. You know, like right now that's going to be
coming out in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Everything is geared towards Star Wars right now. All the products are being pushed super hard.
Yep. And so CoverGirl is doing
a makeup line.
Yeah. And so they have like the stormtrooper thing, and they have like a woman who's like wearing white. It's supposed to be like all spacey and futuristic.
Yep.
But we did notice that the makeup looked oddly similar to something.
Yeah. It looks very similar to the way Susie Sue does her makeup.
Yeah.
And it's very trad goth looking, which makes me wonder if perhaps we're going to see some gothic fashion appear in the new Star Wars movie.
I don't know. I mean, it definitely will probably take off of like how Mad Max did it, where it tries to take casual clothing and then make it darker but futuristic.
It reminds me kind of the way Queen Amidala's makeup looked.
Oh, yeah.
But much more goth influence, so I kind of wonder if it's maybe going to be the makeup of like the Republic or something.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see, I guess. But yeah, so that's a weird one. So that's pretty funny. Yeah, maybe they just have like a Republic goth. I don't know. They're not going to do that. But
there's not going to be a goth soundtrack for sure.
Yeah, but we just thought it was kind of interesting, especially the way the eyes and everything are done. Definitely.
Yeah, so if you need goth makeup, I guess buy from CoverGirl Star Wars.
Yeah. Actually, there was a video on all the colors and stuff, and they're all like, I don't know if they changed, but they were like all metallic and they didn't look very good.
Yeah.
So I don't know if like the eyeliner is any better or anything. But
I don't know at all, really. I can't comment on the quality of the product.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's CoverGirl Star Wars.
Yeah. And then in our last kind of news thing, and we always mention if, say we saw our new show or anything we found interesting throughout the week. And so we went and saw actually Voltaire play. So
it was kind of a last minute announced show.
Yeah.
Voltaire played at the Bar Sinister in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And he played, I should say, the Jimmy Psycho experiment opened for him.
Yeah.
And they themselves were actually very interesting.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of bands do the whole mask kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where they wear like crazy masks and just like try to play like dubstep or electronic music. And a lot of times it's really bad.
Yeah.
But the Jimmy Psycho experiment, they were actually really good musicians.
No, they were very good musicians, and they're a cover group. They do cover songs, but they do them in like a space age jazz Latin influence thing.
It's so hard to explain, but yeah, they did like a ton of covers. They did Hybrid Moments by the Misfits. They did Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division. They did
Corrosion by Sisters of Mercy.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
So it was pretty great. And then they had like the robot voice because it's supposed to be like aliens. So it's like, we must return to our pods. And
they had smoke constantly pouring down the concert.
I loved it. I thought it was really great. But then when Voltaire came on, he just owned it.
Oh, it was everything you expect and want from a Voltaire show.
He's always had that certain sense of humor to him, and he's done kids albums, and he's done, and of course it's like some of his most famous songs are the ones from the Billy and the Mandy Show.
Yeah.
So like Brains and what's the other one? I don't remember what the other one is, but he also has his more popular ones like When You're Evil and his new one Raised by Bats. And you see him perform on like YouTube or anything like that, and you're like, okay, he doesn't really have a band.
It doesn't seem like it would transfer over very well in a live setting, but it very much does because of the way he interacts with the audience.
Yeah, oh man, it's just okay. So When You're Evil is one of his most popular songs, right? And so of course he's gonna close with that, and he's just like, okay, one of the requirements. We have 3 requirements if you're gonna come up on stage. It's like, number 1, you have to know all the lyrics to the song. So everybody, like, a whole bunch of people raise their hands, right? He's like,
number 2, you have to know most of the lyrics to the song.
And so a whole bunch more people raise their hand.
Number 3,
you have to act like you know the lyrics to the song. So everyone's like, oh my gosh, So like everyone goes up on stage. So there's like tons of people packing the stage, and it was just a great experience. He kept joking. He kept busting on himself. He's like,
like, oh, this is little do you guys know, you guys all just sold your souls to the devil, and this is how I look so good at this age.
Yeah, by the way, Lee's looking good, man.
Yep.
Apparently he drinks like a bottle of rum a night on whenever he does the shows. So
well, we witnessed that.
Yeah, he drank a whole big lug of rum.
Yep.
Yeah, that was crazy. And he's like, every time someone comes up, he's like, if you touch my rum, get off the stage. And it was just so great. And it was pretty much everything I thought was going to be and more. You know, I've been a fan of Voltaire for years.
Yeah.
And I just was so blown away by how sincere he seems and how much he seems to really enjoy what he does, you know?
And I've never seen someone who takes advantage of the dynamic between the stage and an audience as well as he does. Because he, like, in order to make just an acoustic guitar and a voice work on stage, you really either have to have the world's greatest voice and be a great guitar player, or you have to be able to really sell your product and really interact with the audience. And he's a perfect example of someone who, he does have a good voice. Mm-hmm. It's not like a super full sound that you expect from a band.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from it at all, because he's constantly interacting with you as an audience and asking you to participate in the songs and the jokes, and he plays drinking games with the audience, and it's really just a fun experience to go see.
It was, it's totally worth it, man. If you could see Voltaire, it's not the band, it's not the industrial band Voltaire, it's Aurelio Voltaire.
Yeah.
And so I know that he goes by, like, it's so hard to find specifically him just because so much stuff is Voltaire. But he's a Cuban musician. Yeah. And if you ever want to look up like one of his albums, just look up like Raised by Bats. And so that Voltaire. Yeah. If you're specifically having trouble finding Voltaire that we were talking about. But that's our news. Basically, Star Wars cover girl, kids Ouija boards, and Voltaire go see Voltaire. Awesome. Voltaire's awesome. And then, not that that's news, but, you know, it just needs to be reminded.
Yeah. Needs to be reiterated.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about Interview with the Vampire now.
Yeah. So this is definitely better than the last movie that we're going to talk about, Queen of the Damned. Yeah. It still has some issues, but overall, I actually really like this movie.
Yeah, I do too. For the year it came out in 1994, this is a really good, solid vampire movie. I mean, the only thing we have really to go up against this that's not super close in time period, but close enough, I would say, is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yep.
And yeah, actually, you can draw some comparisons to that. That was also a very costume-oriented movie, and it was based on a novel. It was an attempt to actually try and do the novel about it as best as they could.
Yeah, they did actually a pretty good job with it.
And both these movies still differ from the novels in kind of key ways.
But that's always hard whenever you're adapting a novel to a screenplay, because you have a novel that's possibly 400 pages, and you have to turn that into all dialogue when half the time that's scene description and character description that's not going to be actual verbal exchange.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a lot of especially with a lot of like Gothic literature, it's always like a whole page describing the beauty of the drapes and the goblets, and it's like, okay.
Gothic literature is very much about the setting.
Yeah, and so it's like in the movie, oh, he walks in and it looks really nice. Yeah, sort of thing. And so you don't get that kind of experience. And also with both these movies, a lot of people had some objections to casting. Yeah. And I'll say right off the bat, you know, even though we're definitely going to do a whole episode dedicated to versions of Dracula. Yeah. You know, we're going to do a 1931 one and Bram Stoker, and probably the most popular adaptations, probably like the 1979 one or something. But we haven't planned it out. I'll say right off the bat, I did not like Keanu Reeves in Dracula.
Yeah.
Oh
but
my
that's
gosh.
a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's a whole. I'm going to talk about that too when we do that. But then in this one, a lot of people right off the bat had issues with Tom Cruise being Lestat.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll admit I don't like Tom Cruise as much in this film. Isn't some people criticize Brad Pitt, but I actually don't have a problem with him in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, if you read the book, you know, and I've read a lot of Anne Rice's material because Anne Rice, of course, is amazing. Yep. And she writes fantastic vampire books, and Yeah, Lestat does come off a little bit more goofy in this, or a little bit more like. I mean, Lestat is like flamboyant, right? Like in the books, even in the books, he is like a flamboyant, but he's also a very strong, mysterious, likable character.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he comes off in this is very unpredictable and not quite as smooth, if that makes sense. Not kind of like suave. And but yeah, I actually do really like the way that Tom Cruise is. In fact, I was really not liking it when I first saw the movie. I was like, he's kind of hamming it up a little bit to a large extent. But then and the more I've seen the movie, the more I actually kind of get used to it. The more I actually kind of like it.
Well, I feel he serves a purpose in the arc of the way this movie is developed and portrayed.
Yeah.
And he really has to be the antithesis of Brad Pitt in this movie.
Yeah.
The way they cast Brad Pitt and direct his role.
Yeah. Well, he's also another example. Inside of the book, Louis is not as mopey. He's not as much of like a moping character.
Definitely not.
He's like a lot stronger of a character, more headstrong than Brad Pitt plays this character. But apparently Brad Pitt was just really miserable when they were making this movie, so he actually portrayed the character a little bit more like kind of down.
Mm-hmm.
Claudia is pretty accurate, actually, to the book, and that's actually pretty good. And Kristen Dunst, like super young at this time.
Very young.
Totally nails it. Like the evil little vampire girl thing.
Well, that's the funny part is like that's such good acting from her at such a young age.
I know, right? And who knew that she was gonna grow up to be how she is?
Melancholia, man.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with the Vampire Chronicles, Interview with the Vampire is probably Anne Rice's most famous book from that series, and it goes on to a lot of different books. The Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned are usually the three that most people reference.
Yeah.
I think it's like Vampire Armand, and there's a whole bunch of specific books about different vampires.
I think there's like almost 7 or 8 books. I think.
Something, yeah. And then the new one just came out, the Prince Lestat. I think it was last year. So there's a lot of material to this, and that's why I think a lot of people feel so passionately about this. In particular, it's really good, like material, and basically, Louis, the guy, his wife has died, and I think his child has also died.
He's very miserable. He's very depressed.
Mm-hmm.
He's just looking to die.
Yeah, and so Lestat turns him into a vampire and gives him the opportunity to basically, not suffer in life anymore.
Yeah, kind of be reborn without as much of the suffering as humans are supposed to feel.
Yeah, and so like many movies with vampires where they're actually portrayed as real characters instead of just, mindless killing machines.
Yeah.
One of the characters has an issue with drinking blood or killing or anything like that. And we see that all the time. We saw with the Lost Boys. Yep. We're seeing with this movie. We see with a lot of these different kinds of movies where people become vampires.
Yeah. So right off the bat, we have Louis who does not want to kill humans.
Yeah. And Lestat seems to very much enjoy killing humans.
Yeah.
In fact, he sees levels of humans as something that he can enjoy. He sees like sustenance of like rats and animals, which you can live off as a vampire in this universe.
Yeah.
As like pathetic, it's like peasant food.
It's actually interesting because I'm not sure if this is the first movie to do that, but it's the first movie that I remember doing that, where you see like people or vampires living off of animal blood instead of human blood.
I know another movie that does it, but I'm not going to say what it is.
Before this?
It's after this.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, I don't actually remember any movies before it. If we ever think of it, then I guess we'll mention it in the next vampire episode we do. But so Lestat does not mind killing people. In fact, he'd rather kill people, and he thinks it's like he's pleasurable.
It's a service to them almost. Yeah,
exactly. So huge difference. Obviously, right in the beginning, like Louis cannot see Lestat as anything but like nihilistic and just searching for something that's he shouldn't be.
So immediately that's going to set up their dynamic for the film.
Yeah,
like they are going to be foils of each other.
Yep, exactly. And so they basically have to abandon their lives and kind of travel around the world because Louis just wants to kind of get away from his life. He basically burns down his whole farm and everything, his whole state.
They eventually, Louis starts realizing that eating rats and pigs and things is not so enjoyable. So he starts killing humans along with, Lestat. But the slaves catch on and they don't want word to spread. So they kill all the slaves and burn down the plantation.
So then after they kind of burn down a plantation and do that whole thing, they find this girl, and so her parents are dead, and Lestat basically turns this little girl into a vampire and ends up becoming one of like the funniest characters in the whole movie.
Yeah.
And one of probably the most likable characters that in like vampire movies, just because she's so crazy.
Yeah.
This was Claudia, and so he turns her and basically is hoping that it will basically bring him and Louis and her together as like a unit.
Yeah, he kind of views them as like this family, and he's trying to preserve the bond that they have, because we've already seen a lot of conflict between Lestat and Louis throughout the film, and he fears that Louis might break away from him, leave him. And this is one of those movies where there's a very strong homoerotic undertone going on.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, is if you ever actually read the books for Anne Rice, there is totally like it's about a gay relationship.
No,
you know?
definitely.
And it's less about gender. It's more about like, hey, you know, we have a strong attraction to each other and all that stuff. And in the movie, of course, you know,
it's very underplayed.
Yeah, it is. It's like almost as heavily implied, especially with the parts with Armand and Louis. Yeah. It's mostly just sort of like, hey, you know, why don't you travel the world with me, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you know, I get it. It's 1994. Having a movie with two starring leads being like homosexual vampires.
They're almost not really even homosexual. They're like
buddies, you know,
pansexual kind of like.
Yeah, it's you know, and then even the parts where and they really play up the parts where there's like hot women in the movie.
Yeah,
there's something definitely to be said for the way that all those are shot. You know, there's the parts where he is basically sucking the blood from her breast.
Yep,
and it is shot in an extremely sexual way. Like
we're gonna see that in Bram Stoker's Dracula, very heavily played.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, these seem like a lot of like the later like 90s and 2000 movies definitely play up the sexual aspects of vampires. But yeah, so it basically almost tries to make it seem like they're less of like a homosexual character by really playing up the scenes where there's women. Like Lestat really seems to like sucking blood from women's breasts.
Yeah, they're very attracted to women, but they make it very clear that to be bonded to another vampire is almost this thing that transcends sexuality.
Yeah. That's basically just existent in the movies where they just downplay the sexuality to kind of make it more the story focus on characters.
Yeah.
And this movie definitely has that in spades. So the characters are all very distinct, and I really like what they did with them in the movie. And like I said, it's different from the book.
Yeah.
That's definitely true.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you're looking for something that's really going to hold true to the plot of the book, and this is not going to be it. I think this is a movie that doesn't spit in the face of the book either.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, you know, Anne Rice was kind of hesitant about some of the changes they were going to make. You know, they altered the ending, and you know, they obviously changed the way the dynamic of the characters work, but it is similar enough. And it's funny, probably the most boring character in the movie is Louis. I mean, honestly. Yeah. But that's because he has to be the one to kind of just see everything and keep going, right? Yeah. This is almost like it's like a journey kind of film, and almost like an adventure sort of film. Not really like, hey, you know, swashbuckling kind of adventure, but you know, this character goes on a journey from being, you know, a man who's alive to becoming a creature of the night to basically finding out what's important to him, and it goes through a lot in that. Lestat is basically a very similar character in the beginning and the end of the film, right? Yeah. So, like, Louis basically changes throughout the entirety of the journey, and
whereas Lestat is very static.
Yeah, even in the end, he still seems like a really crazy kind of vampire. Yep. And just like, hey, you know, I'm Lestat.
He becomes like himself on steroids almost by the end of the film.
Yeah. Claudia, I think,
Claudia's very bitter.
Yeah, Claudia is probably like if Louis is one of the least interesting characters in the movie, Claudia is the most interesting. Yeah. Because she's a little girl turned into a vampire. She's eternally a little girl.
Yeah. And she continues to intellectually grow and understand things that are going on around her, yet she's trapped in this body. And so she, you know, in ways grows to resent Louis and Lestat for turning her into what she is.
Yeah. So she basically starts like killing women and, you know, killing men, because she really is really bloodthirsty. I mean, she's basically has the mind of a child to some extent, where she just kind of wants what she wants, and she looks at grown-up women and is like, when will I become that? You know, when will I grow up? And he has to basically say, you know, like, it's been decades. Yeah. And he's like, you're not going to grow up.
Yeah.
You're going to be a child forever. And she really, really resents that. And she's very mad at him about that.
And while she does resent the both of them to some extent, she definitely feels a closer bond to Louis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because obviously he's the one who turned her.
Yeah.
And Louis kind of cares for her a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But she's also very possessive of Louis in that, you know, when we see Louis start to develop a relationship with Armand, she goes out and finds, you know, Louis a bride so they can kind of be a family to detract him away from Armand.
Well, it's basically sort of like, I think the idea or the sort of thing is that could be her idea, but it's basically to be like, look, you are my keeper because I am a child. Yeah. And you need to find me a new keeper and so she will be mine. Like, you know, like she will be the one who watches me because like if you ever leave me, she needs to be here. Yeah. And that sort of and that is a very interesting thing for a character to do. I mean, it's definitely something that you wouldn't think of for a vampire. Like, you know, most vampires are portrayed as extremely strong characters. They're either portrayed as extremely weak and fragile or the most strong characters ever. And Claudia is a bit of both of that. You know, she's a
very dynamic character.
Yeah, she can kill. In fact, she kills more than like Louis and Lestat do probably. Like, you know, they keep finding bodies and they have to be like, stop killing people, you know? So she is a pretty ruthless killer. Like, she doesn't seem to have any...
Like, she almost has less remorse than Lestat does.
Yeah, like a child would. But she does have the fragility of a child like mine. And so she feels like she's like, I need someone to watch over me. Even though, I mean, she could probably kill anybody in a town. But she still is like, I need a caretaker. Yeah. It's a very, very interesting dynamic. And with the three of the characters together, it's a really, really solid story. Yeah. And it is a little slow going. I'll say that in the beginning.
It does feel a bit long if you're not used to that sort of film, but I don't feel like it really detracts from the film. No. Because there's so much stuff that needs to be set up for this film in order for it to function. Mm-hmm. And there's so much story that needs to be explained. And granted, they cut a lot out. Mm-hmm. I think that if they cut any more out, that it would detract from this film. Yeah. And we're going to see that when we talk about Queen of the Damned.
Yeah, oh man. Yeah. But I gotta say, they ended up doing a really good balance with this one. Yeah. And yeah, it is a vampire movie starring Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. Okay. Yeah. And they are Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise.
Yeah. They're, the pretty boys of their time. You know?
Yeah. So you have to go into expecting that, right? Yeah. I still have to say, I still think Tom Cruise pulled off Lestat a little better than most people would say, but some people absolutely despise this role with him in it. Yeah. I'm okay with it, actually, but that's because I kind of like Tom Cruise.
I'll say this. The pretty boy actors of today are not quite the same thing as the pretty boy actors of, the 90s and early 2000s. Either Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise very much,
can act.
Yeah. They're actually actors. I would say Brad Pitt more so than Tom Cruise, but Tom Cruise still has a lot of range.
Yeah, but Tom Cruise, I would say that the difference between him and Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise tends to lean more towards the witty and sort of like goofier characters. Yeah. And by goofier, I just mean that he's not like 100% serious all the time. Like, he can play the sort of manic characters.
Yeah, he often is kind of like this wacky, like flies off the handle kind of character. Whereas Brad Pitt is always very cool and under control.
Yeah, you smoked a cigarette or something like that. So, so just be aware of that going into it. And that's probably the biggest criticism most people get, because as far as cinematography, set design, costume design,
it's all very good.
It's like exactly what you'll probably imagine from the book. Yeah. I mean, they nail it.
It's a great representation of Gothic literature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't truly call it Victorian Gothic literature, but it plays strong homages to that genre.
Definitely. I'm always just surprised. Like, I mean, it's like the 90s were a time when this kind of movie could get made and actually have a lot of love for it. Yeah. So you can definitely tell that while they were trying to make a big blockbuster movie, they were still trying to be as faithful to this as they could have, because they could have just, like what most movies do, they take the rights, slap a name on it, they put some big stars in it who don't go along with the plot at all.
Just get someone to write the script, grab a big producer to put his name on it,
put some sets on it and everything. But they really took the time to kind of make sure that everything that they kept in from the book played out in a similar way and was done with a lot of respect. You know?
Or if something was changed, it was done so with reason.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really my opinion on Interview with the Vampire. I really enjoy it.
I do too. And one thing I just want to quickly mention, I love, their whole portrayal of the theater of vampires. How they just bring these innocent, terrified women out on stage, and the audience has no idea that they're actually killing them.
That is like such a weird part. Like, but it's, I mean, it makes sense that they could do that back then, right? Like, who's gonna look into it? Like, yeah. So, that is definitely a very interesting part. That's where the movie starts to like really pick up in terms of like
plot.
Yeah. So go watch it. I recommend it.
I highly recommend you watch this. If you've not seen it, like, this is a must-see vampire movie.
Oh, yeah, and if you're wondering what we think of the Guns N' Roses cover of "Sympathy for the Devil," what's up with that, man? Like the end, like it just that's like the song for the movie.
I will say that threw me off so much, like, because for the most part it's a good ending, and then that song plays and I'm like, what?
Yeah, the whole movie it's been like very orchestral sort of music, or like whenever Lestat's around, it's like harpsichord music. It's like
if you're going to use that song, which is fine, why is Guns N' Roses playing it?
Yeah, I know. So it's really weird. I just wanted to mention that because if some people had a question about the music in the movie,
it's probably cheaper to do it that way.
I don't know. They're a pretty big band, so at the time, like still like,
but not as much as Rolling Stones are.
Oh no. So yeah. So that's the Interview with the Vampire. Go watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. So now we're on to our final movie, and that is Queen of the Damned.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll say so. It's released inside of 2002, right? So we have another adaptation of Anne Rice's work.
Yes.
So this one actually combines two books.
Yeah.
The next two books. It's The Vampire Lestat
and Queen of the Damned.
Yeah, and doesn't do very well.
Yeah.
Not nearly as well
almost
as
a decade after Interview with the Vampire was released.
Doesn't do it nearly as well as Interview with the Vampire. So, yeah.
So let's just get right into the plot. The movie starts off with Vampire Lestat waking up because he hears heavy metal music and just shows up at a rehearsal.
Yeah.
And like is sitting there like half naked, cloaked in leather, like singing along with the band, and they're like mesmerized by him.
Oh, and then I want to say right after that, before we even get into anything else, is that the music for this is done by Jonathan Davis, who's the singer of Korn. So if you hear any of the songs and you think that they sound like Korn songs, it's because it's done by Jonathan Davis.
Yeah, with the exception of, like, I think there's a Marilyn Manson song in there.
No, okay, so actually, that's kind of close. It's that for legal reasons, they couldn't have Jonathan Davis sing on the soundtrack, like do an album release of the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So they had other artists come in and record the songs.
Okay.
So like the song Redeemer, which in the movie actually plays like one of the key songs, and like having the woman discover that Lestat's a vampire.
Yeah.
Actually, the Marilyn Manson had the album version of it.
Yeah.
And actually, I like that version. I think that's actually a pretty good song, Redeemer, by with Marilyn Manson singing it.
Yep.
I guess I'm just not that into Korn.
Yeah, I mean, neither am I. But I could easily see like Lacuna Coil recording the soundtrack for this movie.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's totally that like new metal sound,
Yep.
Very like tribal sounding, detuned drums and guitars and
Yep.
Yeah. So Lestat awakens because he hears new metal.
Yeah.
And
except we're still very much throwing, at least like the people who appear in this movie who are part of the music scene, very much still look like they're in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean this movie was in like production apparently. I mean, for that time, but
I guess it is the early 2000s.
Yeah, so it's 2002.
Yeah.
So it's still technically they could have like late 90s sort of style.
Yeah.
But it is definitely that crossover time where you're starting to get like more of the shiny, glossy early 2000s sort of like rock star look.
Yep.
And yeah, you definitely still have some of the 90s vibes on this.
Yeah. And so I just can't believe the way they opened this film.
Yeah.
Like,
so
he just shows up in a rehearsal room and announces to everyone that he's a vampire. And everyone just goes with it.
Yeah. And so then the very next scene, they're all rock stars.
Yep.
and
he talks about how they're his family. Or
yeah,
whatever.
and he's like, I'm a vampire, and I'm only going to play this one show because I don't like repeating myself, and so everyone's just like, okay, you're a vampire, I guess. And
by the way, one thing that I will say, I'm not sure if Wikipedia is right on this or if the movie just portrays it badly, but when I watched this movie, it seems pretty obvious that he's announcing to the world that he's a real vampire.
Yeah, that's what I think, so.
But if you read the Wikipedia plot summary for this movie, it suggests that not everyone knows that he's really a vampire until Jessie goes to her,
David?
council.
Yeah.
He goes to David and says, I think he's a real vampire. And he's like, he is a real vampire.
Well, yeah, it's basically says, like, I thought, like everybody else, like it was just a publicity thing, but yeah, I mean, it's...
They don't make it very clear, though, in the movie, that it's like a publicity thing. Like, he seems to be like...
I'm a vampire.
Very blatantly stating that he's a vampire, and...
Yeah, I don't know. This movie has a ton of issues. That's one of them, is that, like, he's obviously being marketed as a vampire. He's, like, showing that he has, like...
It would have been smarter if... like the movie portrayed him as marketing himself as a vampire versus just announcing to the world that he's a vampire.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
That's just one of the many things the movie could have done better. But so he announced that he's a vampire, and he draws the attention of like all the other vampires, and
he directly makes a call to them. He's like,
the
rest of you out there, like, show yourselves or something.
Yeah, and so he basically his mentor, the person who turned him, was a guy named Marius.
Yep.
Marius. And I just had to say it like that.
Yeah, we have all these flashback scenes of them.
Yeah, and so he basically is going to go after Lestat and stop him because you can't reveal your identity to it. But then... Again,
with a slight homoeroticism between the creator and the
just
creation.
Just barely in this one. It's barely a thing. Like, they portray Lestat as so straight and
they do, but whenever Marius is there, suddenly he's like kind of gay.
Marius. That's how he talks. He says everything like... He's like... So I knew that I had to tell the world I was a vampire. So it's like the voiceover in this is like ridiculous. But I have something else to say about that, so I'm gonna hold off on it. But, so Marius comes and tells him that, like, oh, remember however long ago, like, you had released the Queen of the Damned as Akasha. So I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Akasha is the queen of she's the first vampire.
Yeah, the first vampire, and she's played by Aaliyah, who tragically, died very extremely young, right as this movie wrapped. So she comes back, and so there's basically this plot of Jessie this is the woman researcher, trying to learn more about Lestat, and
she also kind of wants to be a vampire.
Yeah, she says, like, this is what I always wanted, to be a vampire, and there's like this whole plot of like she's like part vampire, kinda like
she's related to a vampire, but we're not made aware of that until like the last 5 minutes of the movie.
She's like a niece of a vampire
who's one of the ancients, apparently.
Yeah, of an ancient vampire. And so there's this whole thing about her and Lestat like becoming a couple and like falling in love with each other.
Except we don't know that that's happening.
No, we'll get to that. but then the first vampire who's come back and can kill all the other vampires. And then there's like Marius, who's
going to be her new king.
Well, no, it's Lestat who's going to be the new king, and then Marius.
And
Marius is like trying to stop Lestat with the ancient vampires, but
Marius basically warns Lestat that all these vampires are going to come kill him.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like Marius is like sided with the ancient vampires, like it seems like, and then he's like, "I'm gonna stop you, Lestat," and then he like saves him, and then like is kind of siding with. It's really confusing. So
it is. I have no idea whose side anyone is on throughout the whole film.
Yeah,
because like half the time it seems like Lestat wants Akasha to come back, but apparently he's also in love with Jessie. I don't know.
Yeah, so this is really weird. So yeah, that's basically the plot. So there's like a subplot. There's like the main plot of the first vampire coming back, and the subplot of like the girl and her family and the ancients and Lestat forming a bond with her.
And I would say maybe if you had read both of the books that led up to the making of this film, you would understand it more, but I almost think they would just piss you off more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So this does a really bad job of combining these two stories because neither one of these plots or the flashbacks, I think, feel extremely cohesive.
No, not at all. Like they feel like separate films, and when Marius comes back, it's almost like, okay, now he's coming back. Why?
Yeah,
and he almost didn't need to be in the movie at all again, ever.
Yeah, after the Akasha has like been released and stuff. It just is. It's a really, really frustrating thing because they take so many easy way outs on this movie, right? So like the whole flashback thing is like, oh, she found his journal. Flashback for like 30 minutes, and then like, oh, okay, all of a sudden it's just back to normal life, right? To show his past. It's just, and then also just everything with the rock concerts and all that stuff. It just feels like they just threw this stuff together.
Also, how does David and the rest of this like group know about vampires? Like, that's never explained.
Yeah,
they just know that vampires
paranormal
exist.
Investigators. Yes, I know. He's like, don't tell them that he's a vampire. We know he's a vampire, right?
I know, but first of all, we don't even know what organization they are. Like,
it says the building. I think it's like paranormal investigation. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so
they like briefly like show that, but they don't never suggest that they actually know anything about it until all of a sudden he's just like, oh yeah, we already knew he's a vampire. And it's like, what? How? Why? Do you exist prior to this? What, like, have you been around for ages? Like, what?
Yep, that's true.
How did you get his diary? Because they're in possession of his diary.
But we already knew. Yeah, so that's their reasoning. Like, well, we already knew it. So yeah, it's a mess. If they would have just seriously picked some kind of idea and made it like it developed into a plot, instead of having to cram two good stories into one sort of crummy movie, they could have like at least just ruined one book with one crummy movie. Because if they cramming all his past and everything into it, it just doesn't work. And doing the whole cutting back and forth between like the future and everything. It's just,
and also like all the stuff with Akasha is like the least interesting stuff that's going on in the movie.
You know what's actually funny is it's probably my favorite character in the movie. I always like the vampires who aren't afraid to kill anybody.
She doesn't bother me as a character. It's just like she just shows up so randomly that I have no attachment to her in the plot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so why is she in this movie?
Yeah, that's true. Especially since it comes so late. She turns up about an hour into the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like she's revived and like killing like people in the whole dance club thing an hour into the movie. And so it just feels like all this stuff happens and she shows up and she just kills. She could just like the most ridiculously overpowered character.
Yep.
And could just kill all these people.
But apparently her one weakness is that you can attack her while she's feeding.
That is so dumb. Like he sucks all her blood, and then she can't hurt him, and then like all this, man.
All the ancients gang up on her, and
and she dies.
Suck her dry.
Yeah, she's supposed to be like the most powerful thing. She's like
and she's killed in a 5-minute scene.
Yeah, she's like a badass for 2 seconds. Like she's a badass for like all the way up until when it's convenient for her to be killed, and we need to wrap the movie up in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and she dies in like 2 seconds. It's like, oh, if I just suck her blood, then we can suck her blood and kill her.
So it's very confusing. So like again, the plot summary for Wikipedia describes the last scene as Akasha like having almost mind control over Lestat.
Yeah.
But it seems like he's very willing to go along with what she's saying up until she says you have to kill Jesse.
What's even weirder about like it's so hard to even know where to start with this. Okay, so the one of the biggest issues I have with the plot is that obviously one of the biggest things in the plot is supposed to be that he has in love with Jesse, right? Nowhere in this movie was I like...
They have 2 scenes together up until like the end.
Yeah, I just don't understand how they just like...
The rest of the time he's screwing, groupie vampire wannabes.
Yeah, exactly. A girl who looks like the singer of the Muffs. So I just don't get it. And even when they meet and she cuts her breasts and like offers herself to him.
Yep.
He's like seems disgusted. He's like, "No, I don't need this.
Yeah.
I am Lestat."
And then when she actually spends some time with them and he gets to know her and it's more apparent that there's some kind of interest or dynamic between them. Again, when she's like, "Turn me," he gets very angry and he's like,
"You don't know what you're asking for.
You don't know my suffering."
Yeah, exactly. So it's a mess.
And yet he decides to make her a vampire at the end of the movie.
Yep. Anyway, and then she's totally happy. She's like, yeah, okay, everything's solved.
And he's happy too.
Yep.
So the whole fighting her becoming a vampire is completely unnecessary.
Yep. I know. So that's like a huge issue, right? All that stuff, the Akasha, the Jesse turning into a vampire, the Lestat mind control, the Rockstar, the flashbacks, all that is just a mess in the way that it's put together, because none of it is really developed into anything that is relatable, anything that makes you feel sorry. Like Lestat says, you don't know my life. It's so difficult. Yeah. Nothing about his life seems difficult. In fact, he is exposing himself to the world to make his life more interesting for fun.
Yeah.
And like you said, he just spends his time killing and eating groupies.
Yep.
Like, there's nothing about it that makes this character sympathetic. And that is one of the issues, Even Lestat, how he was portrayed. By the way, this is in this case.
You know what this movie feels like?
What?
Like a really good music video.
I wouldn't say good music video, but it feels like a music video. Yeah, there's a lot.
Well, if you cut it the right way,
okay.
Like really good music video.
Yeah.
I almost want to re-edit this, take all the audio out and just set it to a song and then re-release it. And I feel like that's what it should have been.
Oh gosh, I feel like that's what they were trying to do. I feel like that's what they did with the concert scene. Just like, oh, we need to fill out this movie some more. Just play 2 songs.
Yeah, I know.
So it's just a mess, and the way actually it's told, it breaks so many movie rules. One of them is that it has 2 ongoing internal dialogues. So Lestat has an internal dialogue where he's like, I was awakened and I knew what I wanted to do. And that's supposed to be like what he's thinking in his head.
By the way, that's one of the worst internal dialogues I've ever heard in any movie.
Well, it sounds like he's just trying to hump the microphone or something. So it doesn't feel natural at all. And
it's just that didn't need to be narrated. It could have just been shown to us.
Yeah.
I hate unwarranted use of narration.
Yeah. Well, then they also do it. Jesse also has an internal narration. She's like, I started catching on to Lestat.
Yeah, I know, but it's very apparent that she's doing it. So again, it's why do we have this internal dialogue?
I just don't get it. They could have had a scene where she's talking to somebody or something. You don't have a movie with 2 ongoing internal dialogues, because then you're like, wait, whose perspective is this from?
Yeah. And you just don't use internal dialogue, period, if everything that they say can be explained by things that you can just show the audience and have shown the audience.
Yeah, this totally reminds me of another movie. This may sound weird. Probably, I think some of our fans may like or understand this reference. Is one of the movies that did the dual internal dialogue, or I think even 3 or 4 people have internal dialogue, is Dune.
Yeah.
And we all know that movie has an insane amount of issues.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is a totally ridiculous thing. Also, just the effects and the cinematography in this, it's just not really inspired. It
just feels like very of the times music video cinematography.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that they do so much in this movie is the flying over panning zoom shot.
Oh, I know.
It's like, oh, okay, we're going to this building. I'm flying over the building and I zoom into it. And then it's like,
we can never dare stray away from the green and blue color grading.
And the vampire effects when they're moving really fast looks really dumb, by the way.
I know.
It looks like they did something wrong. I don't even know how.
Looks like they made it Windows Movie Maker or something.
It's like one of those things where it has an after image. It looks so bad. And
the whole ghosting trail thing.
Yeah, it's so terrible. So there's all these sort of issues with that, and it just even the sets. So whenever they have these big sets, they don't really put that much into them. It just doesn't feel alive, like a real thing. Like Lestat's house.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like he's actually there. It feels like he just, they bought a mansion, put a whole bunch of rock star stuff in it.
Yep.
And they're just like, okay. He's like, this is where I live. And then.
Well, we don't see him spend that much time there.
Yeah.
There's 2 scenes that take place there. 2 or maybe 3 scenes.
Yeah. And most of the scenes with actual characters, you just have 1 or 2 people in a room, and it seems like they're not really touching stuff. This is
a waste of a set.
Yeah, and then they have the concerts where this is just millions of people.
Don't even get me started on the concerts.
Yeah. So it's just totally ridiculous, and the nothingness movie feels alive. When they did Interview with the Vampire, right? So and the reason I can compare it to Interview with the Vampire is because it's the same author.
Technically part of the series.
It's technically the sequel, right?
Yeah, the unofficial. off-brand sequel.
Yeah.
It's like a spin-off.
Yeah, which is so ridiculous because it's like the books are a sequel.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, every single place, like whenever they go to a city, whenever they go to like their house, whenever they go to everything, it feels really lived in.
Yeah.
And I feel like almost inside this movie, they even stray away from going outside that much because it's like, okay, well, he's a vampire, so he's got to be in his house, right? Like, and if you're watching Interview with the Vampire, they're both Lestat, right?
Yeah.
Even if you want to say like, oh, this Lestat is not that Lestat, right?
Yeah.
Same.
They're based on the same character.
Lestat is not afraid to go out. In fact, he loves going out and like schmoozing with women and
yeah, I know,
and like being very flamboyant and everything.
He's a very mopey Lestat in this movie.
Yeah, he's just trying so hard to be cool.
I know.
And so it's if you could almost get a blend of the two Lestats, less of the Queen of the Damned one.
Yeah.
You could almost get like the character that most people would see, where he's a little bit more reserved, maybe a little more suave, and like Tom Cruise is very outgoing Lestat, very not afraid to hurt, not not bound by all these things.
Yeah, if we're going to have a movie that just features Lestat, really, then I would like to see more of a balance between those two.
Mm-hmm.
In Interview with a Vampire, I don't see as much need for that because we have a foil for Lestat.
Oh, absolutely. That's why it works.
Yeah.
Just because of Brad Pitt's character. So I honestly, this movie was hard for me to watch. Queen of the Damned was a very difficult movie for me to rewatch for this.
If they rebranded it as a comedy, I would say it's genius.
Oh man, yeah, seriously.
So watch Queen of the Damned. No, for real.
Oh my god, this movie is like seriously. It totally breaks one of my rules of just being something that's kind of boring. Like they try a whole bunch of stuff, none of it really works. They have characters that are totally
uninteresting, unconvincing, undeveloped.
It's everything.
Yeah.
So it's just really, really, really annoying.
This is a movie that I highly recommend you avoid like the plague.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So that's Queen of the Damned. So
yep.
I don't really have anything to say that was really good about that movie.
No,
and,
I don't.
And
either.
I'm not surprised. So
I think this is the first movie that we did not give any positive attributes to.
Well, it is a lot worse because it is based on something that is very good.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have a bad vampire movie based on nothing. Like,
yeah, it's one thing to try and fail at something, but to take someone else's work and then just crap all over it.
Oh, yeah, and just in case you're wondering what Anne Rice's opinion of, these two adaptations are. So with Interview with the Vampire, she was hesitant at first, but then she actually saw it and she actually really liked the changes that they had done with it.
Yeah.
Because they were more subtle and like, okay, they make a happier sort of ending, like sort of like movie ending, right?
Well, it's like a perfect analogy for that is kind of the way the changes they make between Fight Club the book and Fight Club the movie, and how Chuck Palahniuk actually talks about how he thought that Fight Club really did a good job of adapting it and did things that the book never could have done because it was a movie.
Exactly. And Anne Rice is like, she even said she was hesitant about Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt being in the roles, and she's like, they actually surprised me. She gave it the stamp of approval, the Anne Rice stamp of approval. And man, if you can get that, then shit, you can get anything.
Yeah.
But with Queen of the Damned, she was locked out. She said, don't do a movie with Queen of the Damned. Like, I don't think it's a good idea. You should probably do the Prince Lestat first, or you should do one of my other books.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, the contract was going to expire, so they really rushed this movie out.
Yeah.
And she totally disowned it. She says that she's watched it one time. She has no desire to watch it again. It totally mutilated her work. She can't believe that they did it.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, she literally offered to help them write a screenplay.
Yeah.
And like fully. And
that would have been good, actually.
Yeah, and I think she had actually helped with the screenplay on Interview with the Vampire.
Yep.
So it's just really sad that even the author who this meant so much to is like, basically this is one of her biggest things she's ever done is basically just butchered for money. So then she doesn't get the rights to give to another company.
So that's been Queen of the Damned.
Yeah. All right. So this has been GothCast episode 12. I am Dr. Sanders.
I'm Robbie Gore. Once again, we got to briefly
plug the social medias.
Yep. So we got an Instagram, just GothCast, Facebook,
GothCast.
YouTube, GothCast space video.
Mm-hmm.
We have a website, gothcastradio.com. No www because we've done away with that nonsense.
Yeah.
And we also have an email, gothcastradio@gmail.com. Feel free to contact us on any of those mediums.
Yeah.
We usually get back to people very quickly.
Yeah, a lot of people like to comment on our Instagram if they have something to say or just...
And we like hearing from you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, we love any suggestions, and of course, we always appreciate any kind of iTunes reviews.
Yeah.
All of those. I know iTunes is sort of going away with dinosaurs, which is kind of weird to say that, but
yeah,
of course, we'll always host there because it's one of the easiest hubs to actually host something on, and most people are familiar with it.
And if this is your first time listening, or maybe if you've listened to a few of these episodes and you have not yet subscribed, please, we would love it if you would subscribe.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, if you have anything you'd like to tell us or anything you want to criticize us on, like the internet usually does, you can reach us at any of those. We hope you have a spooky time during the holidays coming up.
Yeah, a very spooky Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Things will be out
after
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So we hope you had a spooky Thanksgiving. But yeah. So I'm Dr. Sanders.
Robbie Gore.
All right, stay spooky.